It's truly been like hanging on the anchors of what the customer really wants and truly positioning the company to focus on who's truly paying you. And while we have clients and capital and finance people that and banks that provide a lot of the capital in order for us to invest into communities or invest into projects, at the end of the day, our true customer are our renters, and those are the people that are really feeding the top line of any project that you're really going on and doing. The industry talks about pilots, but pilots need to be very well fleshed out in terms of what are you doing, what's the impact, what's the change management, and then on a small scale, how are you truly measuring the outcomes? We've certainly failed on a few implementations and then learned from that. It's also like and I could talk about several examples that have gone well and some that we're having to hit sort of like, hey, pause, reset. That doesn't mean the theory is wrong. It just means maybe the implementation wasn't quite there. Let's go try a different path. And a lot of that's been around, different operating models that we've tweaked along the way. So I'd say it's, not being afraid to fail. Just don't fail too big where, you're hemorrhaging and you cause a ton of issues, particularly on the customer front. We waited for people to walk in the door. So we've got great account executives in a more classic leasing role. So in really breaking that down, and I know I'm now being very long-winded in my answer, but that's kind of how we're trying to really make sure that people are clear around the roles and responsibilities. And in doing so, we create a sense of belonging and a culture of how can I advance in my career? Oh, hey, they've identified where I fit, how I can really be trained around where I fit. And now I understand the path for me because I sit within this very comfortable set of standards and opportunities in front of me. You do this 9-box of like high potential, high effectiveness, essentially. And then you would always have these people up in the top right quadrant that you're like, man, these are my superstars. These are the people we want to focus on. And I kind of started asking questions. And when Radical Candor, I've read that book and I've read it a few times since then. I was like, well, what about these people that are in the bottom right quadrant? Like, they might not have high potential, but they show up and they execute every day. And in Radical Candor, she kind of called them rock stars. So they were just like your rock. They were people you could rely on to execute no matter what. They weren't necessarily looking for, man, we want to go to the moon. We want to be the next executive. We want to be the next manager, senior manager, VP, whatever it was. But they were like, look, I love showing up and I love doing what I'm doing. I just don't want to be aspirational and go do these things. And what I really came to is like, you need both of those people in an organization, particularly in a commoditized kind of industry where so much of our cycle is driven off of business cycles. Who knows where markets are going? Who knows when transaction activity is going to pick up? We've got operational headwinds on supply and all these other things. You just need people that are going to show up and do their job every day. And I always tell this story. And when I first heard about kind of like rock stars and what they are, like I thought about my mom. My mom worked for the phone company for 43 years in what was AT&T through all the breakups of Southern Bell, Bell South, then Singular, and then the roll-ups again, now back to AT&T. And then she was forced retired after 43 years at like early 70s. But she was like, don't ever give me a promotion. Don't ever give me anybody that reports to me. I'm just going to show up, do my job in procurement. These contracts are going to be awesome. And I'm going to go home at 5 and I'm going to show up every day at 9. And that's it. We're disruptors because we just asked a question and the answer was, it's always done this way. And we just said, well, look, it should be done a little differently. I sort of just like was curious and I didn't try and disrupt intentionally. It was, hey guys, let's just try something a little different. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. We can always go back to the way it was. And it kind of goes back to some of the things we were talking about at the beginning of the things that we learn along the way. It's just, don't bite off more than you can chew, but don't be afraid to try something a little different. And I think that's really what the process is. I would say the other thing is just you got to foster true connection with people. It's not just communication. You can have 100 meetings and phone calls, but if you aren't really connecting with that other person and creating a meaningful connection and understanding their viewpoint, their perspective, even if you don't think that's the path and all you're doing is just talking, or they're just talking and you're like, I don't really care about what they're saying. We're going to do it my way, or we're just going to do it. But you're not really creating a connection in which you're getting buy-in in a meaningful way. It's not going to work. Look, I think just it's tough to always have an open door, but that's something that has served me well, is that you really get and you build a culture with people when they just know you're there for them when they need you. There's just a lot of people that will run through a brick wall for you and show up with energy for you in a different way than if you're just constantly using the stick to beat them over the head a little bit.